and welcome to Landscape Photography World, the podcast for everyone passionate about landscape photography. I'm Grant Swinburne and I'll be your guide as we explore the world of landscape photography through the eyes and lenses of photographers, both up and coming and seasoned professionals. I like to dig a little deeper into the way they think about their photography, how it fits in their lives, and where they see it going into the future. Candace Dyar started photographing as a way to manage anxiety and depression, taking her Canon SLR out on hikes as a therapeutic outlet. That early connection to nature, combined with an art history background, gradually shaped a practice with a much bigger purpose. Based in Washington State, Candace now works at the intersection of wildlife photography and conservation advocacy, partnering with organisations like the World Wildlife Fund and Defenders of Wildlife to draw attention to threatened species and the ecological importance of apex predators. A wolf encounter in Yellowstone back in October 2021 was a turning point that shifted her focus decisively towards wildlife. This week, Candace talks about using images and captions to challenge misinformation about wolves, educating people on coexistence and the reality of living alongside predators, running workshops in wild places and balancing the admin side of a photography business with actually getting out and shooting. I hope you enjoy the show. G'day, Candace. Welcome to Landscape Photography World. Nice to have you on the show. Thank you for being my guest this week.
Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate the invite. I was excited when I saw it.
Excellent. Thank you. Let's start with the basics. Who is Candace Dyar and why is she a photographer? I won't say landscape photographer, and that'll become obvious during our conversation, but why are you a photographer?
Why am I a photographer? So it's been going on almost 2 decades now that I've been into photography, which is crazy to me. But I started doing photography actually with your standard point and shoot camera and had been told from, some people, you have a good eye, you should think about, getting a larger camera at some point. And one day I saved up for one. I was working as a territory manager at the time around cameras. And so I decided to pick up a Canon SLR and start taking it out on my hikes with me. And it just kind of went from there. I started photographing what I would see on my hikes, but it was really more of a way to decompress. I think I've mentioned this before in the past quite a few times, but I have anxiety, and it has done a tremendous job at relieving that and helping me manage anxiety and depression issues over my lifetime. Getting out in nature has been, as it is for, I think, a lot of people, extremely therapeutic for me. And so that was largely, I think, what got me into photography initially, and just having that time by myself, just connecting with myself more and connecting with nature. And I've always had a love for nature. Grew up with my parents, took us out camping all the time. And I'm very thankful to have been raised with parents that very much instilled that love for it. My dad would, make sure that we got out as often as possible. And, I'd go hiking all the time when I was younger. This is just kind of like a natural progression from that. And also, I think, showing my artistic side, because I've always had more of, as long as I can remember, I've had more of an artistic sort of side. So it's a way for me to express myself as well.
Awesome. That therapeutic side of things comes up quite a lot on the podcast. Many, many people that I've spoken to have used photography, I should say, as a form of healing or a form of therapy. And I think it's a very common experience. What is it about photography that you think has been of the most benefit?
It's a good question. What has been the most benefit of photography overall, you mean? I think that it's an outlet. It's a way of telling stories at this point for me, telling a story about what it is that I'm photographing. And at this point in time, the The subject matter deals more with conservation, which I really dove more into a handful of years ago, right around 2021 or so is when I really started to dive more into conservation efforts, both with landscapes and with wildlife. And so for me, it's a creative outlet to express something about what it is that I'm photographing and to try to help the viewer to connect more with what it is that I'm showing them, what I'm putting out there. Because I feel like at this point today, people are largely very increasingly disconnected from nature, to the point where a lot of people think it's appropriate to go to places like Yellowstone and pet bison. So the people who don't grow up with that sort of upbringing to respect nature, who maybe have been thrown an iPad in their face, or maybe grew up in a place where, you maybe mostly have buildings all around you and you don't have a natural space to go to. I think that it's really important for people to make that connection again if they haven't. And bringing it up before, I was talking about my childhood. It's really crucial, really critical, I think, for us to have that connection when we're kids,
Definitely.
because that kind of establishes more how we're going to perceive the natural world around us. Is it something that is there for us to have dominion of and tame? Is it, like a zoo? Or is it something that we're a part of and we can't exist without? We're just one element within it. So having photography, photography, I think, is the best outlet of expressing why it's important to, more than ever, connect with nature.
Yeah, fantastic. You've also mentioned the artistic side of things. And one thing that always fascinates me is the stories that people have around when photography, or they made that realization that photography was art for them. Do you know, or do you have a point in time or an experience that you realize, oh, what I'm doing is art. It's not just capturing my hikes or my trips into nature?
It's a great question. I think that it comes from your subconscious to a certain extent. For me, I also have an art history background. So, I majored and that I have a degree in art history. So I think that definitely plays a part in it, whether I realize it when I'm shooting or not. But yes, I mean, the creative liberty that you have over your own work to have your own style, you get to determine what that art is. Is it going to be something that you just took an image of and you upload it? Or is it going to be something that you decide, I want this to have more of a painterly feel to it? Or,
Sure.
I'd like to accentuate the light a little bit, maybe the eyes. Well, why do you want to do that? For wildlife, for me, I often enhance the eyes to try to connect the viewer more to the wildlife. This is a living creature. It's not just something that is existing there for our amusement. They have their own lives. They
Yep.
are connected to the land. They play a huge role in shaping the landscape that most people photograph. So what is that role? And trying to connect the viewer to strike some sort of an emotional reaction, I think, is very important. So the eyes I play up usually in photographs. The light for landscapes I will often play around with, but I think that you're the one who determines what that art is. And for me, I think that when I realized that it was actually art was the first time I opened Photoshop. The
Okay.
first time that I started playing around with my images in Photoshop and in Camera Raw, I realized that this is like a playground here with what I'm able to do. I am not the type of person who embraces AI. It's a whole other topic and subject matter. So I don't, if something wasn't there, I'm not going to just put a mountain in the background if it didn't exist. And some people do that. Some people think that's okay at this point. But, I don't want to get to the point where it didn't look like what the scene actually was. It needs to reflect what was actually there. Nature is beautiful in its own right. So I don't think it needs to be really messed with very much. But if you want to accentuate it, I feel that's appropriate as an artist, and you get to determine how that's accentuate it and develop your own style over time, which is really cool.
Yeah, I think you made a really good point about the choices that photographers make, and even down to in the field, the choice of lens. You put a wide angle lens and you take a shot of mountains, they're going to look really small over in the distance. They're not going to be
Right.
highlight. Whereas you get a zoom or a tele lens and bring that to the fore, and the compression basically makes it the feature. Those
Right.
choices that you make really make a difference, I think, in terms of both compositionally, but also in terms of how people are going to respond to that art.
Right.
You talked a little bit about conservation there, and I'm really keen to talk to you. We were talking earlier that most of your work prior to a certain point was landscape. You've now sort of started to transition or transitioned more towards conservation and wildlife photography. First off, why is that? But I want to talk a little bit about the conservation stuff. I want to talk about in a bit more depth as well. But I'm just interested in the why behind that shift from landscape more to wildlife.
I've tried to think to myself, if there's one major reason, and there's not, there's a lot of reasons for it. And I think that it's really all come full circle for me, because when I first got into photography in 2008 or so, I wanted to do wildlife photography. And yeah, some people don't know that, but I actually wanted to pursue wildlife photography. And why didn't I? The simple reason is the blunt reason is funds. It was too expensive for what I wanted to be able to do. So, I got a multi-purpose lens, one of those Tamrons that's I think it was 150 to 600 or something. That was my first wildlife lens, and then a 200 to 500 Nikkor lens. So I made progress through there, but I was never too serious about it because I knew to really go pro with it,
Yeah, you're
you're
talking
looking at
$20,000,
over.
$30,000 lenses.
Yeah, and so I literally, I mean, I think that's real, right? That it impacts a lot of people,
Absolutely.
in terms of not being able to afford it. So I started out with landscapes, and there are images that I've shared from probably 2008 to, or sorry, 2018, 2017, where you see wildlife more in there. Um, but it's largely like you see wildlife within the landscape. I'm not focusing too much on that. And so that's one of the reasons, was just, the funds. I feel like landscapes was just kind of the natural route that was taken,
Yeah.
because of that. And, it's been a great way to connect with nature. Obviously, I mean, I've spent a long time doing it, but about a handful of years ago, I finally stepped up, and, after conducting so many workshops, I purchased my first real, I guess you could call pro wildlife lens, which is, I use both Nikon and Olympus, and this is an Olympus lens that came out mirrorless. That is the equivalent of 300 to 800. So I have been able to it's really opened me up a lot more to wildlife photography. But there's also um, one particular type of encounter that I had in October of 2021 that really sent me down this pathway to shooting wildlife more, particularly wolves, which was that I ended up seeing a pack of wolves in Yellowstone, pretty close encounter that is to this day the most incredible encounter I would say I've ever had in the wilderness. And I guess the best way of putting it is that it really shook me up. And it was like this bolt of lightning just hit me and was like, okay, this is what you're going to do now. And I say that because it's, you can tell since that encounter, I've largely shifted what I photograph, and I've gone much more down the conservation pathway, specifically when it comes to certain wildlife that are more persecuted and threatened due to certain legislation that's out there. And so, yeah, that's, I think, why that natural sort of pathway has occurred. But it's sort of a catalyst, I think, in 2021 when that happened. That that's sent me on this trajectory, and I haven't really looked back. And I still do photograph landscapes, but largely the landscapes that I photograph contain wildlife within them. And I feel like, for me at least, everybody's different. For me, I feel like photographing wildlife and also more intimate encounters, it is, I feel like it is a deeper way of having me connect with the natural world. It tells more of a story, I feel like, about the scenery as well, about the landscape that you're photographing. They shape the landscape. Well, they shape the land that we're photographing. That's their home. They live there. We're residing on their homes. So it's important to tell their story. It's important to be able to open ourselves up to the inhabitants of these landscapes. And only about 4% of global mammal biomass is made up of wild animals today. So if you think about it, the wild is largely gone at this point. And in terms of the inhabitants that make it up, most of what we're seeing today is livestock and animals that we have domesticated and animals that we determine whether or not they should exist within the parameters that we set. So hopefully that makes sense. It's a long answer to what you asked me. There are other reasons, but
it's fantastic.
Those are some of the main ones.
The really interesting thing for me around conservation or environmental style photography is how it can actually be used as a tool for education and advocacy, and the role that photographers play in promoting those conservation efforts. How do you feel, or how successful do you feel that you've been in communicating those stories?
Communicating conservation efforts. So I partner with different organizations, nonprofits that are very active with promoting conservation for wildlife and for our national parks here in the U.S. and our national forests. One of the big ones that I partner with is Wildlife for All. And by partner, I mean I collaborate with them mostly on the social media efforts. So if they're sharing something about a certain cause, I will partner with them and try to draw attention to that particular cause. Or one of the recent ones that we talked about was Mexican Wolf Week. So I shared an image of Mexican wolves that I photographed, which extremely difficult to see in the wild. I went to the Endangered Wolf Center and photographed them. And so we were talking about, what the awareness should be about those specific wolves, how to advocate for them, why it's important, what legislation is trying to be passed to take them off the endangered species list right now and why that matters, what you can do as a person to act and help out and stop this from happening. So that's what I'm really trying to do. Is it's not just about sharing a photograph of a pretty scene or an animal. It's about what you can do to help protect these places or protect these animals, protect this wildlife, because it's really important right now more than ever. And I'm not going to get political, but politics does impact everything.
Absolutely.
And it does impact our national parks and our national forests and our wildlife, particularly our endangered wildlife. It's important to speak up for these places. It's important to preserve them and protect them because they're not permanently protected. They're not immune from selfish, greedy interests coming after them. And it's really important that we, the people, keep them protected. So what I really am trying to do nowadays is when I share an image, more often than not, there's an important reason that I'm sharing it than just the surface level image. There's something for the public to try to get involved with and try to protect the species or this landscape that I have put out in the photograph.
Cool. I'm interested in, you talked about telling stories with your photography and how you sort of incorporate that storytelling element and narrative into your photography. and sort of what techniques you're using, both photographically, but also in the way that you're presenting those images. I know from doing a little bit of reading and research, there's been some success stories, particularly with wolves, the reintroduction of wolves into certain areas where those areas have regenerated because there's impacts in putting those apex predators back into the environment where they were almost non-existent. And it's just interesting to me that how those stories like that. I know also over there the reintroduction of beavers into streams and rivers and those sorts of networks has also played a big part in helping regenerate areas. How do you sort of bring about some of those storytelling elements into your photography?
Yeah, it's I think depending on the image that I put out, whatever the scenery is, that plays a large role in what I'm going to speak to. So as an example, I have an image of a white wolf from Alaska that I shared, and I spoke about the aerial gunning that has been going up in Alaska for the wolves and the bears up there and how they're under threat from that. And that's legislation that has, and for anybody who hasn't read about it yet, if you Google Alaska aerial gunning of wolves and bears, you'll find quite a bit of information about it. But yeah, I will speak to the animal that's in that particular area and what's going on with them telling the story. So for Alaska, that white wolf, I talked about what people can be doing to try to speak out and act out about to protect the wildlife in that area. For Yellowstone, if I share an image of, I've cut quite a few images of Yellowstone wolves eating on a carcass, which is very controversial, I think, for some people. It's the circle of life. It's as raw as nature gets, but some people also are more sensitive than others and they don't want to see that. So,
people don't want to see it, but as you said, it is the circle of life. And
it's the circle of life.
What's the wolf going to eat,
Exactly. So when I do share those images, every once in a while I get comments from people saying that maybe they didn't want to see it or something. And so depending on the platform that it's shared on, it might be covered with sensitive content. That seems to be happening more often than not lately, which is pretty interesting to me because there are other things that are shared online that aren't labeled as sensitive that should be. But anyways, but yeah, I will put, in my caption that, the importance that wolves play in the ecosystem, that they help bring about balance and that without them, that things start to fall apart. So why are they a keystone species? What is it that happens when we take wolves out of the ecosystem? And the whole reason they were reintroduced to Yellowstone is because people saw what the scientists and the people that were there working there saw what happened to the ecosystem when they were taken out, after several decades, the overgrazing of the ungulates and basically destroying the ecosystem. Not just that, but also different wildlife were literally disappearing. And so after wolves' return, we saw the regeneration of basically restoring it to what it once was, and also bringing back wildlife that were native to the area before they were exterminated, like beavers, as you mentioned, is one of the key ones. But also, they saw like more other animals were returning, like eagles, and you had even more foxes. So they were balancing out the levels of where everything was supposed to be within that ecosystem. So they play a very key role in that. And that honestly is one of the primary reasons why I've become so focused on wolves is, what do you think of when you hear the word wolf? What's the first thing that you think comes to most people's minds? What would you say?
What would I say? Probably Little Red Riding Hood.
Really? Okay, that's interesting to me.
You don't have wolves here. I think our biggest predator is what's called a dingo. And they're kind of a wild dog.
Yeah. Right. So yeah, you're more removed from it there in Australia. Yeah. But for here, what I think a lot of people think of is the wild and the wilderness. That's what the word wolf means to a lot of people, the first thing they think of. So when you're removing a wolf from the ecosystem, you're removing what makes that area truly wild.
Yeah.
And wolves really push up against this whole notion of domestication and taming the wild and us determining what should exist or not exist and based on what we feel is appropriate. And if you think about it, managing wildlife, those two words are completely contradictory.
Yeah.
Right? You're managing wildlife, so then it's not wild really, because you're determining how many should be around. You're determining how many get to live, where they get to live.
Yeah.
And if you need to save your cow, or your livestock from them because that's more important than this other animal. So, it's largely based on what humans have determined that benefits us. Does that animal benefit us? And if not, then why should it survive?
Yeah.
Does it have, the right to exist here on this landscape? And it's quite ignorant because these wolves, other apex predators, cougars, they've been here for hundreds of thousands, millions of years. They obviously have a right to exist. They have been on this land longer than we have. And so the 4% that are left in the whole world, I think that it really begs the question of our own humanity. We need to be asking what that means, like in terms of our own humanity. Are we going to just domesticate everything?
Yeah.
Or are we going to allow natural spaces to exist and rewild certain areas? I think that's really going to determine our own, level of humanity.
Yeah. I think the arrogance of humans over many centuries, because these things haven't happened overnight, and they're not all modern policy decisions. I know farmers and wild animals, particularly predators, have always been in conflict. They're still in conflict in wilder areas in Africa and Asia, for example. It has always been a level of tension, but I think the arrogance of humans is that we're smarter than everything else, so we should, basically command what happens in this place because I've chosen that we're going to live here or farm
Right.
or whatever. And I
Hopefully
think
that answered your question, because if I kind of went off on a tangent there,
no. I love a good
that's
tangent.
what I'm trying to express, and the imagery is, it's more about storytelling, telling their side, and so what it is that I'm photographing, telling more of their side of things, and coming from maybe their sort of perspective versus just ours, because we don't think about their perspective enough. We're thinking about what serves us, what benefits us, because too many people think that we have dominion over everything. So yeah, it's about really asking what does the wild even mean anymore? We should have more of it, shouldn't we?
I can't disagree. I love wild places. I love being in places where humans have had a much lighter touch. I won't say no touch, because there's very few places like that left on the earth, unfortunately. But where we've trodden lightly, I really enjoy being in those spaces because they are much more enjoyable because of their wildness and because of where they sit in the whole scheme of where we are in the world in terms of land use and environment.
And one thing I thought I'd mention too is you talked about the first thing that came to your mind was Little Red Riding Hood for wolves. And it's so important, I think, that you mentioned that, because that shapes perceptions, how we're brought up as kids.
Yeah.
And so there was actually a post recently that was shared on Instagram from a wolf technician in Yellowstone. Her name is Taylor Raby, for anybody who wants to know. She shared a very powerful post about how wolves are portrayed in the media versus what is actually accurate.
Yeah.
And one of the things that was shared was this cartoon of Little Red Riding Hood. And then she shares this sort of she'll share something like that. And then right afterwards, she shows how they really are behaving in the wild, which is they're just playing with each other and just they're having fun out in the wild together. And then it switches to the film Frozen and how wolves are chasing them and attacking them when they're out. And and Beauty and the Beast when wolves are coming after
They're a
them.
scary animal, aren't they?
They're
Yeah, that's
terrifying. They're so scary. And then she switches it back to them like they look like they're smiling out there and just playing and having fun. They don't want to be around humans.
no.
They don't care about us. And when they do see us, they usually try to get away. Depending on where you're at in the world. Now, if you come across a wolf out in the middle of nowhere up in Alaska, like I did, you might have a solo one show more curiosity, like, which is what happened to me
Yeah.
because they're not used to humans there as much. So, and that really speaks to, if you think about how so long ago they eventually became domesticated,
That's
and
right.
they were the first dogs. I know there's the Native American aspect too, and the indigenous aspect and their perspective on wolves, which I don't feel like it's appropriate for me to speak to that for where my background, but the thought that long ago we walked together as brothers, that they were sent here to be companions with us, and we should respect that and honor that, and how much that has changed over time and why. So there's a lot of history to all of that, but I think it's really important that you brought up Little Red Riding Hood, because if that's the first thing you think of, that says a lot to me, because there's so much fear there, and there's so much, and it's just been ingrained in us
Yeah.
and so many people since our childhood to have this fear and misperception. It's so off from what it truly is.
Yeah, you made a really good point in that most wild animals, I think, either try to avoid, unless they're curious and they don't have any experience and they want to find out what you are.
Yes,
They
yeah, and I
by
mean,
and large will move out of your way as much as they possibly can, and they're usually only. It is interesting here. We have a large population of dingo on an island that's been called Fraser Island for years, but its traditional name is Kagari. And there's been a number of tourists attacked on that island
oh,
by,
really? Wow.
yeah, by dingoes. By and large, you'll find that it's because the humans have tried to interact with them in some way
Yes, yeah.
rather than just leaving them be. That said, people leaving food out and not taking proper precautions,
Yeah,
of course, a hungry animal is going to come in and try and they can smell that on the wind, and they're going to come and try and grab what they can find. So
yeah,
they will get attracted to, because they see that as a source of food, they'll be attracted to campsites and so forth. So, the way
yeah.
that we interact and the way that we operate in and around wild animals, particularly predators, really goes to how they're going to behave with us.
Yes, I live on the Olympic Peninsula in Washington State, and our top predator that we have, we have had them in our backyard before on the cameras. They've shut up cougars, and you are most likely never going to see one in your lifetime. They're very elusive, very stealthy. There's, I think, 2,500 or so in all of Washington State, so not too many. But there was a story of a child being attacked in Olympic National Park last summer, a small child. And I always want to know, like, okay, what's the full story when I hear about some attack going on? And it's always either somebody straight off the trail, especially a toddler, wasn't being paid attention to, which that's an easy meal for a predator that is around, or somebody not protecting their livestock adequately, maybe not putting the right fencing around it, or something around along the lines of hiking alone, hiking at dusk. And I'm not saying any of those reasons, any of those people should be attacked. Obviously, no, it's terrible for that type of thing to happen. What I am saying is that we live in coexistence with them, and we need to respect that they are here as well, and they need to survive. So that means that you understand that maybe you should hike in a group. Maybe you should pay, very close attention if there's somebody small around you, and don't let them go off the trail. There's all these things to it's just being mindful.
Absolutely.
Things, right?
A lot of people, when they think of Australia, what's one of the first things that comes to mind when you think of Australia?
Australia.
Into dangerous land.
Oh, for the outdoors, the landscape.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Deadly animals is what the big stereotype is usually, like things want to kill you.
Yeah, and sharks is a big
sharks. Oh, yeah.
We had a spate of shark attacks here in around Sydney, the city where I live, and when you dive a little bit deeper into those attacks, all of them happened after heavy rain. People were swimming after heavy rain. Sharks are known to come inshore when the water becomes a little bit brackish through runoff. The reason they do that is because they have parasites on them, which will drop off in brackish and fresh water. Sharks, there are species of sharks that swim all the way up rivers into true fresh water to get rid of parasites. So, number one, you're going to encounter more sharks after rain. Number two, they're also swimming first thing in the morning at dawn or dusk, which is when they start or end their feeding cycle. They feed a lot at night. And, you know, I was brought up here in Sydney going swimming. Never swim straight after rain. Never swim when, you know, the sun's just getting up and the sun's gone down. You don't.
Yeah, just being mindful, right?
Yeah, and it's not that hard.
It's really not. I mean, at this point, too, I've had close encounters with grizzly bears, in Glacier. How do you react when something is that close to you? It's just, but, not being alone is a huge one. There's this temptation. I know because I'm tempted. I love being on my own in the wilderness. There are certain places here, though, around where I live, where I know better than to try to hike alone. As much as I might enjoy it, I understand that might be tempting for that cougar. I'm not that small. I'm not like a small child, but if they're hungry enough and their resources are somewhat depleted, then they might get desperate enough for that type of thing to go after somebody who's alone. So it's just being mindful about it and thinking of them first before you think of yourself is really important, right?
Definitely. Let's talk a little bit about your choice to become a full-time photographer and start workshops and that sort of thing. What was your thought process before you made the decision and as you made that decision?
So I'm not entirely full-time with photography.
Sorry.
No, I'm not. I do workshops. But yeah, I mean, what made me start wanting to do workshops was, I think, wanting to share the experiences with others. I've always really enjoyed teaching. And now I'm teaching wildlife photography workshops as well. There's one coming up in Yellowstone next winter, which is really exciting because it merges both wildlife and landscapes. And I really love the idea of being able to speak more about what we can do towards conservation efforts. Donating to conservation efforts to protect these places too is huge. So I think that's part of it too, is educating others, not just on the photography side and what they're photographing, but also about the wildlife that exists there and the landscape itself. And the workshop that we're doing in Yellowstone is with my husband Ryan. He's doing it too. He's a full-time landscape photographer, and we also have a local guide that we are partnering with who is based there in Montana. He's a wildlife biologist. Andrea Barat is his name. And so he's got that background where he tracks the animals and a connected network there where it's important to be able to know what's going on there from day to day. So in a place like Yellowstone, you always have something going on. You turn a corner and there's going to be something there, but tracking animals is really important, and having that sort of network around where you can speak to others and figure out where the sightings are. Workshops, though, for me, it's a way of educating others. It's a way of sharing experiences with others. And yeah, I decided to do it because it's something that I had a feeling I was really going to enjoy, and I do enjoy it.
Fantastic. One of the things that people running their own business have to struggle with is balancing all of the things that they need to do. The administrative side of things, you're the chief executive officer, you're the chief marketing officer, you're the chief photographer, et cetera, et cetera. There's a load of things that you have to do. How do you balance your admin load with your photography workload?
Geez, sometimes I wonder how I do it. Like, really, it's a lot of sleepless nights. It's not a good answer to give you. Yeah, it is a challenge. I feel like that's a continuous challenge, and I think you'll find that if you ask that for most people. So, for me, I need to give myself daily reminders all the time so that I stick with what I'm doing. If I didn't remind myself that we were speaking today, like if I didn't have the reminder down on the calendar, I would have never remembered it. It's just, and it's important. Obviously, this is an important discussion we're having, but it's just any reminders that I put down. I feel like that's critical just to kind of keep you focused and keep you in place. So I need to make sure I designate this time aside to plan for, what's coming up for this next workshop, or I need to take this time to really sit down and process some images. And that, I think, is something I'm really becoming more disciplined in, is just sitting down and processing, because I enjoy being out there so much and being in nature. I don't enjoy sitting behind a computer as much. And I'm sure that's a lot of people are that way, obviously, but you have to be disciplined enough to do it. It's a big part of it. And, this so much, I think so many people perceive photographers as just being out there and photographing all the time. So much of it is being at home in front of your screen. It's not, a lot of it is
even
not
just
as,
editing alone, going through and culling the images
yeah,
that you do want to work on versus those that you kind of go, yeah, they're not, they're
yeah,
not winners,
promoting your work. I mean, I'm just now going to have a really good, legit print workshop. Well, I don't know about really good, but it'll be better than what I had up on my website here soon, versus people individually reaching out to me for prints. I'm going to have a store with different options up there. It takes discipline to really, sit down and, just work on your website and, or grow your email list, all that stuff. And what you find a lot with some of the best artists I know of are really not good at marketing. It's not, I think that, you find a lot of artists that are more introverted. So they're not as good with social media. They're not as good with marketing themselves with the business side. So yeah, it's challenging. I feel like I honestly envy people who are really good at that type of thing, because I am not huge on social media. Like, I don't really enjoy it very much compared to, I think, a lot of other people. I'm not trying to go viral. I'm not, trying to spend a lot of time on there, but I also understand that it's important. It's important for what we talked about, conservation efforts, advocacy. It's important to get your art out there and to connect with others. So it's a double-edged sword, right? There's the good and the bad, but yeah, it's difficult to have that balance. And I'm not just doing photography workshops now. I'm also doing women's wolf retreats. I'm putting together. So you have one thing that is photography workshops, another thing that's very different. So it's balancing that out too. But I think the best answer to what you asked me is to be disciplined, largely in part by having reminders set up that you keep yourself focused and keep yourself in place. That's what works the best for me.
Yeah. I feel what you were talking about in terms of website updates. I spent the last 3 or 4 weeks, spare time, of course, because it's not what I want to primarily be doing. But I think I actually spent all of last Saturday going through product pages and whatever, just trying to sort out formatting issues and whatever. But having done a reformat of the website, just so time consuming unless you can afford to pay somebody else to do it. I come from a background of doing IT, so I won't pay somebody else to do something I won't do. But the time and effort that it takes is enormous, and you've actually got to take time out of everything else that you're doing to actually do these things, because otherwise you're promotional. I'm just about ready now to actually start working on the product itself and start changing things up there. So I've made the website
Yeah.
look the way that I want it, navigate the way that I want it. But now I've got to actually get in and start playing around with the actual product and the content now. And
That was one of the big goals I made for myself this year, though, was to really focus more on putting more of my work out there, like finishing images, because I've got so much that I need to go through from over the years. And my downfall, I think, my weakness is that I always just want to be out there. And so I'll go to a place like Alaska. I went to Kenya last year to the Masai Mara, and my first thought is just like, I want to go back. Like, I don't like want to be sitting here behind the screen. So it's difficult because I do enjoy that creative process, but just being so torn, wanting to be out in nature and then feeling like you're just kind of confined inside and staring at a screen. So.
Speaking about staring at a screen, when you've been out in the field for a bit and you come home and you get the SD card or the card out of the slot it into the computer, are you straight into editing, or are you one to leave things for days, weeks, months, years before you actually decide to get into them?
I have images that I opened just the other day from 2015.
Wow.
That I plan on working on. So stuff from my honeymoon from Norway back in 2015. It's good to also revisit shots and reprocess them to show how your creative style has changed and evolved over time. And I process wildlife images totally different than landscape images. I don't take as much time on them because I don't feel like it's needed, for one, usually. Unless it's within a landscape, the wildlife within a landscape, but also I process them very differently. So, but yeah, I mean, I will often sit on an image for a long time. And I was like that with landscapes too, when I was primarily shooting them. When I'm processing them too, I will revisit them usually multiple days before I'm finished with them because your eyes get tired over time. And if you've been working on it for too long, I feel like, at least for me, things can get wonky after a while. So I don't want to like just put something out there and it's too magenta or oversaturated or just, way off. I like to revisit it. I also like to get another opinion. So I'll often ask Ryan about it, just like, what's your opinion on this? Or I'll ask a friend, what are your thoughts? What can be improved? That critique's really good to have.
Definitely.
I think it's good to have others critique your work before putting it out there. I think is good too. Not because they should necessarily persuade you from being your authentic self and, taking away from your authenticity, but just to get honest feedback from someone else, maybe, and I don't always take the feedback, but it's good to have. And maybe I will take it to heart. Yeah.
Definitely.
So yeah, if that answers you, very often I do that. And more often than not, it's rare, I find nowadays, where I will upload something right away and process it right away. Unless it's some epic event that took place, and even then, I mean, just depends on how busy I am. But if it's something very defined as epic, then yeah, I often will sit down and process it right away. Otherwise, I find myself not putting it off, just I'm not too good at doing things immediately after doing it. And I have so many images too from being outside on various trips, and I'm outside a lot. So a lot of times, trips can sort of mesh together, It's like if you have a trip 1 month and then just a couple weeks later, another major trip, it's hard to keep up with all of it, right?
Oh, absolutely. I'm interested in the practicalities of some of your editing style. You mentioned that you do a lot less to your wildlife stuff, but I'm keen to talk a little bit more about the landscape stuff because we haven't spoken too much about your landscape work, which is totally fine because the conversation is the conversation we have. I do things like I'll flip images upside down. I will turn them black and white so that I know that I'm not blowing out whites or making blacks to black and that sort of thing, because those sorts of techniques help me. Are there any tips or tricks that you use when you're editing something that have helped you decide what you're doing with your images?
If it's a more intimate scene, then yeah, I've done that before too, where I'll turn it upside down or turn it, clockwise, maybe 90 degrees to see how it looks. I do that pretty frequently, actually, with the more intimate type of scenes. I think that black and white I do more rarely. I probably should, I think, play around with that more because I do very much enjoy it. But what's great about photography too is that you can take a scene and like a small, if you have a sort of a grand scene that you photographed, you can take a small portion of that and kind of, if you find something within that that seems pretty striking, you can crop it, if it's depending on obviously if you have a full frame camera or not, but you can crop that in and there's multiple different types of images you might be able to create out of one scene. I've done that pretty often actually with my photography. So yeah, a lot of times I'll find that I'll shoot some sort of grand scene and then there's something afterwards in post-processing that really strikes me. And I take something within that scene and focus on it and crop it out of there. That seems to happen more frequently, I feel like, as time goes on. As far as other creative aspects, though, for wildlife, I feel like I usually know what it is I'm going to be doing as I'm photographing the scene. So it's different than landscapes.
Yeah.
But for landscapes, yeah, I feel like a lot more creatively that can be done in certain scenes, in certain situations. And I am, over the years, I feel like I've been more drawn to the more intimate scenes than I have been the grand landscapes. Again, I feel like it has felt as more of a way for me to connect with nature on a more deeper level in certain ways, mostly because you're slowing down enough to pay attention to something that small within the grand scene that you're in. Or maybe the conditions aren't ideal. Maybe you're in a place where a mountain is socked in and you had planned on photographing it. And so you have to try to figure out, hey, what else is going on here in this area? And so what has really struck me over the years is plant life with water droplets on it. I really enjoy. That was something that I really started to get into more during the height of COVID, when we were more confined to our backyards, and what we had around us was just photographing what was there closest to us. And so for me, I gravitated more towards these intimate scenes with the morning dew or the morning water droplets that you would find on things. And what I found is that you could be really creative with that. There are certain scenes that I've photographed when, if I'm not able to shoot what I had originally intended, then I find something else that's there. And I end up saying, oh, you know what, that was actually way more interesting than what I thought I was going to be photographing to start out with. So I think really just slowing down and just taking a look at what's around you, taking the time, just sit there for a little bit and look at what's around you.
Yeah, makes all the difference.
Yes.
You mentioned printing, and I'm always keen to find out, do people print their own work? Are they using services? How do they prep their images for printing? What's your printing practice look like?
Don't print as often as a lot of other folks do. I feel like for the pros who do that a lot, be somebody like, I don't know if have you interviewed Aaron Reed before?
No, I haven't.
Should have him on at some point, but he's a person who would be able to go to great lengths, I think, to talk with you about printing and what to do. For me, though, I've used Bay Photo quite a bit over the years. I know that probably sounds like a very typical sort of response because they're a massive company, but I've done a lot of printing with them and the stuff's come out great. I have had no complaints.
The thing is, if you're getting a result that you're happy with, then...
Yeah, I mean, I've printed and I've make sure that I proof it beforehand and make sure everything looks right, but I haven't had any issues with them. And yeah, I've had great luck with Bay Photo. So that's typically my go-to for printing. But yeah, I don't know all the ins and outs about different photo printers, what's good and what's bad. So I'm not going to give you a very professional level sort of answer to that. I don't think, because I don't make a lot of my income off of photo printing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, as I say, I'm just fascinated by the way different people do it. Some people, they spend thousands of dollars on these large format printers and all the ink that goes along with it, because that's actually the real cost in printing. And
Yeah, eventually I would love to do that.
yeah, same here. I'd
Yeah.
absolutely love to have a large format printer that I could use.
We don't have the biggest house either, so I'd have to figure out where to put it.
Yeah,
That might be kind of
that's
challenging.
always a struggle. I'm always fascinated by the different ways that printing can just different images look on different papers, the print profiles you're using, all of those aspects that come into it. You know, it can be quite a deep rabbit hole to dive down into doing your own printing. And I know people that do it really well. I know others that struggle with it, and it's just always an interesting
Yeah.
thing to find
I
out
always
how
I like
people do it.
putting the ball in the other person's field because some people are very particular about what they want. So I try to put the ball in their court and say, what is it that you're looking for? Because some people are like, I want it to be on a floating mount, or I want it to be in a metal. There's so many varieties that
Definitely, yeah.
that's why I've had people just reach out to me with personal requests over the years. But with the print store I'm going to have out, I'll give some different options. And if they want something more specialized, they can reach out. But usually people have a set idea of what it is that they want. I find what they're looking for. So yeah, I usually just like to put the ball in their court and ask them what it is that they want. And I can try to customize it how you like.
That's a
And Bay Photo offers a lot of those options.
well, this is it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever hit a creative wall or found yourself with a lack of inspiration? And if so, how did you handle that?
A lack of inspiration. That's a great question. I think that there was a time in my life where Instagram was starting to become a lot more popular and the whole influencer craze was becoming big. And I was noticing, this was around 2019, I think, and up and through COVID, but I started to notice more when I'd visit places. An example is Mount Rainier. I was at Reflection Lake, and somebody had just a tent with a fire set up there, right there in a place where you're totally not allowed to do that. It's illegal.
Okay.
And I started seeing that type of thing more and more often, attributed more to influencers who wanted to get that shot to put up on social media. And I found it became very frustrating for me to, for a time there, want to get out and actually photograph some of my favorite places that I like to get out to, because I just felt they were becoming more and more tarnished, and it was more prevalent that people were out there wanting to get their influencer shots or selfies out there doing things that were illegal just because that was getting them a viral shot to put out there, and it wasn't about connecting with the area or enjoying nature at all. So that, I felt like that time period when that was first really starting to get popular was very challenging for me. And then I feel like there was almost this sort of like rebellion against it from photographers that came out of that, and we were speaking more out against it too. So, but yeah, I mean, it's also just so many places are over photographed, I guess you could say at this point, but it doesn't make them any less majestic. It's just for some places they are just kind of overrun with people. And so it's sad to say, Mount Rainier is one of my favorite places in the world that I've been to, but I'm not usually there on the weekend ever. I will go there first thing in the morning and get out of there by mid to late morning because I like the idea of not having crowds around. And so I think that the whole notion of just, places becoming swarmed with people that's been something that I've struggled with. And COVID, people getting out, that led to a lot of people getting out to the parks too. And so now you have the lottery systems and people, having to make reservations to go up to certain areas. So,
well, even places like the Arch there in Utah and whatever, queues of photographers lining up for the shot.
And
blows them up.
You're usually not going to find me in these places unless I have a friend who's like, I really want to experience this place. And so, I go and show them. It's like friends I have who come to Seattle and they're like, let's go to Pike Place Market. And it's like, okay, I never go there, but I'm going to take them there because it's the touristy thing to do, right?
Sure.
More often than not, you're going to find me in places that people don't know as much about. I have national forest areas and parks near me where I rarely see another soul around. That is my kind of place. That is how I connect with nature. And I don't say where those places are. I say that it's in this national forest or this national park because I realize how important it is to not have them overrun
Yeah.
with people. Areas that look a lot like the Hoh rainforest, but you're not going to have a lot of people there like the Hoh rainforest. And the Hoh rainforest is magical and so special, but you're not going to find me there on the weekend in the summer. There's just certain areas where if you're really trying to connect with nature, I feel like it's important to do it without crowds, if possible.
Totally agree. That brings us to photography's place in society. What do you think it is? Where do you think it's going?
Nature photography's place, landscape photography's place. I think at this point in time that it's really important for us to be speaking up more about protecting areas that are fragile because they're disappearing rapidly. So as far as what the role is for landscape photography and nature photography, I think that conservation needs to play a larger role in trying to conserve these areas we enjoy so much, because what's the point in photographing them if they're no longer around? And as I was mentioning earlier, we're finding that people are wanting to come in and try to use these places for their resources and to strip away their protections. So I think that plays a really large role for landscape photography and for nature photography. And I'm not saying everybody should do that, but I think that it's a good idea if you are photographing something to, if you know that area has been in the news or, has been in the headlines about potentially having something done to it. And in the case for where I live, the national forests, it's, they're being threatened with logging right now, millions of acres just in Oregon. And I live in the Pacific Northwest. So if you value these places, if you value these locations, I think it's important to speak up about it, because the more we do, the more it catches on, the more awareness there is. And without awareness, then nobody knows what's going on. So that awareness is really key. And the photography is a great tool for spreading that awareness when you're speaking out about it.
Yeah, fantastic. What's the best and or worst piece of advice anyone's given you?
The best or worst? I think the best advice is to follow your intuition and to be authentic to yourself. So when you ask me why I changed from landscapes to wildlife over the years, it was honoring that part of myself, that intuition. And that's my authentic self. Is I'm not sharing what I do for the necessary enjoyment of others. I'm doing it because that's what I connect with and what I enjoy. So honoring your intuition and authenticity. The worst advice? It's a good question. I'm trying to think. I'm going to need a minute for
Someone's
that.
got to have told you, you've got to do this or you've got to do that.
Oh, well, I mean, so I think this is probably a good general answer for you. As a woman, I'm sure I'm not the only woman to talk about this. As a woman, we are more often than not told what to photograph when we're
I
out
don't
about
understand that.
shooting landscapes. It happens to me if I'm by myself. It happens to me more than I'd like to say. I mean, it's just, and it's almost like, I don't know if I look like little girl lost or what out there. I feel like I look pretty headstrong when I'm out there, but I don't know if it's just this innate nature it's always a guy to say what you should be photographing. But yeah, be self-secure in what you're photographing, because the worst advice that I'm ever given is what I should be pointing my camera at when I know what it is I want to be doing. Now, it's different if there's like something running over that I don't see. Like if I've been there for 3 hours and I'm looking for a wolf or a bear, yes, please tell me if it comes into the scene.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's what I was there for. But if it's something I've already composed and set up and like I'm ready to take the shot, a landscape shot, you don't need to come over and tell me, hey, come over here. This is where it is, because I mean, it's not like your idea is for everybody else, you know? So yeah, the worst advice is to just give in to what others want just because they feel it's taking away from your own artistry. It's taking away from what makes you a photographer. So yeah.
That's just complete anathema to me. I don't understand people that are so interested in what other people are doing. I mean, I'm struggling to deal with what I'm dealing with, let alone telling somebody else what to do.
I mean, I've also to the point had leading workshops over the years. I've had people on the workshops try to tell me what I should be doing.
Wow.
I'm leading the workshop. So humility, I think, would be something that would be good for more people to have as a trait, especially if you're going to sign up for a workshop. It's probably a good idea to maybe take to heart what the person who's leading the workshop has to say, right?
Yeah, yeah. All right, well, I've only got another couple of questions for you. One is, who else should I be speaking to? Obviously, Aaron, you mentioned before.
From the printing aspect, for sure, I'd say if there's one person you want to talk with about printing, as far as I know, he is a master when it comes to printing. He's got prints in galleries all over the world, and he teaches workshops about printing. Yeah. So that's a guy you should have on when it comes to talking about printing, for sure. I think if you're going to have another guest on your podcast, I highly recommend Jenny Wong. She's a Canadian photographer. She's a scientist, and she shoots both landscapes and wildlife. And she does a lot of storytelling through images. She just went to the Himalayas and photographed some of the foxes there, the Himalayan wolves, the serval cats. I'm trying to think of what else. But she also talks about the landscapes and the culture, the people, and the importance of and honoring the cultures where she's photographing. So I think it would be great to have her on. She's extremely talented, and she's a friend of mine. So.
Thank you. Jenny's definitely on the list now.
Okay, great.
All right, my last question is one that everyone on the podcast already knows, but we don't know your answer. Do you like pineapple on pizza?
Actually, I've had pineapple on pizza, and depending on how the pizza's prepared otherwise, I actually enjoy it. It might be blasphemous to certain people. I get it.
Yeah, some people aren't. They're very anti, but yeah, I'm fairly neutral. If it's on there, I'll eat it. If it's, I won't pick it off. But it's not something.
I don't want anchovies on my pizza.
With the right pizza, anchovies can be good, and just not too many.
I think it's largely how the pizza's prepared. You know, is the crust good? You've got to be
judicious with your anchovy. All right.
But yeah, I think I'm neutral. I've enjoyed pizzas with pineapple. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks. Yeah. And thank you again for being on the show. It's been absolutely wonderful talking to you. Where can people find your work?
Aside from my website, CandaceDyar.com, Instagram is where I primarily share my work and advocacy, conservation efforts. And I think that's primarily what I do for social media right now. So either my website or Instagram are the best places to find me.
Cheers. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks again for listening to Landscape Photography World. I hope you enjoyed the show, and keep listening because I'll be joined by some great guests in upcoming episodes. You can find my work in this podcast at grantswinburnphotography.com. I'm also on a load of social media pages. Just look for Grant Swinburne Photography and you'll find me. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share. Let people know if you've enjoyed this podcast. I'm really keen to hear what you've got to say about what we've talked about today, and really interested in hearing how other people have experienced the world and wildlife, etc. in general. I'm Grant Swinburne. Hope to see you out shooting soon.